There we go. Just quickly, we're going to talk a little bit about how the last few years have really empowered our employees in new ways. Go over the research that we've conducted at Dale Carnegie and actually comparing it to some research that we've did about 10 years ago, and the trends that we're seeing in employee engagement that I'm sure you're seeing as well. And then end with some ways, options, questions, how our leaders, both the senior leaders and managers, can engage our employees so they feel valued in our organizations.
As the employees have become more in control, as unemployment is changing and we've got more and more open positions than ever before, that the employee has some leverage that they didn't have before. And we have found that a lot of our clients are struggling with these three areas. And one is attracting the right talent. We found the person that we want, they check all the boxes, and we're ready to make an offer, or maybe we make an offer and then 3 days later or 3 weeks later say, yeah, I changed my mind, I got a better offer, and they're gone. How do we incentivize them to not only come to work with us, but how do we incentivize them to do their very best? And then finally, how do we keep them? So in the chat box, just type, which of these areas are you challenged with at this time in your organization? So if you go to the bottom of your screen, there's a little bubble, speech bubble that says chat, and click on there and just type, there you go, Shannon's got it. Just click in there.
All right, there's an incentivizing.
Yeah.
Retaining.
Yeah. And agreed, Lisa, right? We really do have to focus on all three.
Yeah.
At times, one does seem to rise to the top.
So Shannon, you were early to jump in. Attract was right on the right on the top of mind for you. So what are some challenges that you're finding with attracting the people that you need for your team?
Well, it's difficult being in higher ed. Salaries are already lower than you would see, outside of higher education, financial services, and other organizations that pay higher. So we're challenged to get creative with what we can do to even get people to look at the openings. Sometimes some of our openings, our positions do really well, and others we struggle for weeks just trying to get candidates. And then once you get them, then the challenge of the salary. So
right.
Sometimes it's just hard just to even get them to get to the posting, look at the job, and apply for it.
Wow. Well, thank you for that, Shannon. And then Francis, you mentioned retaining. What are some of the challenges, or what are some of the issues that you're finding with retaining people once you get them in the door?
So with retaining, our people go through I manage a customer service call center.
Right.
So, when you're customer service in a call center, you're usually the bottom of the food chain in a company. So our people come in, and at first we were having a hard time attracting people to the position. So we made them fully remote. So it expanded our candidate pool. We increased the starting salary from like $5 from where we were a year ago. So we're getting a much larger candidate pool, more qualified people. However, our training is very rigorous with a lot of information and a lot of systems. So we actually, if we start with 10 people in training, we usually end with 5 that actually make training. Like people they're like, no, this is just too much. And that's where I guess my whole thing is, even if they finish the training, sometimes they resign shortly after. Just had resigned. We've been taking calls live for a few weeks,
Right, and you've made that investment of time and energy, and to bring them up to speed. But by the time they're ready to actually do their job, we're replacing them already. All right, well, let's go back to Lisa, and thank you, Francis, for that. And Lisa, you mentioned all three.
So I'm in financial services, and our
struggle is really on both ends of the spectrum, with incentivized sort of in the middle, where it's very expensive for us to attract somebody new for most of our positions, because they require so much technical knowledge at this point.
Right.
We don't, tellers are easy to come by and easy come, easy go. But the higher level positions that need to have more knowledge and more training is getting harder and harder to attract them. And so we have to focus on how do we retain them. And I'm one of the leaders in one of the business resource groups, or employee resource groups as they're known elsewhere. And we're really digging in because we can't afford to give competitive benefits packages to what PNC and Citibank are giving. And so how do we look at the benefits packages that we do have and make sure that all of our employees know what benefits we have, and then B, really focus on where do you want to go and what are your goals so that we can retain them. Nobody wants to stay in the same position. Well, I can think of one person on my team who is very happy with what he's been doing for the last 20 years, and he doesn't want to make any changes. But he is the unicorn.
Right.
So how do we, grow our people so that we can retain them?
Right. It's interesting, and it's, you mentioned it's easier to attract the entry-level positions. That makes sense, and it kind of ties into what Maureen is typing in the chat box here. That Maureen, I appreciate the fact you're thinking outside the box a little bit, and that's perfectly great. Is that you said attract, develop, and retain, and it kind of sounds like what Lisa's talking about is that we don't want them to stay in that one position. We want them to move up in the organization. And Maureen, are you finding that as well?
Yes, and definitely looking at the whole employee life cycle, right? So you bring them in, you develop them, you hopefully retain them. But even as alumna, right, they're part of your network.
Right.
And so, yeah, what can you offer at each stage? That's good for them and good for the company at the same time. Right.
Yeah, it's important that we have to balance that, right? We want to invest in our people, but we also have to make sure that we're managing the finances for the organization. We can't just keep raising the rates until we get to a point where we're pricing ourselves out of the market. So it's a challenge, and it's gotten more challenging over the past few years, and it's kind of manifested itself a little bit differently over the past couple of years. And the phrase empowered employees in this situation talks about the fact that they have some leverage more than ever before, and they are making certain demands that they weren't making in the past. And it's our job to figure out how close can we get to these demands. So if you take a look at some of these items here, which one of these are you seeing in your organization that they're requiring flexible working model and benefits, new expectations of their managers? And what we can do is, if you go to the top of your screen, you'll see a green bar that says you are viewing Robert Johnson's screen. Just to the right of that is a button that says view options. Click on that. One of the options is annotate. And if you click on the annotate button, the annotation bar will appear. And one of the tools is called the stamp. And if you want to grab a stamp, you can use the check mark or the star, and you can just place it right next to any of these bullet items that you are currently experiencing in your organization. Let's see how we're doing.
Yep, the check marks are lining up, Robert,
Check
with the
marks are coming.
conversation that we just had.
Yeah, the flexible working model. Now, we've been kind of remote even before COVID. Our organization's been remote for close to 10 years. Right? I think I haven't worked in an office since 2010. But I know a lot of organizations, had to work remotely for a while because of COVID. And now that, the COVID issue is, maybe not completely over, but not as much of an issue as it was certainly a few years ago. Now they're saying, okay, let's come back to the office. And some of the employees are saying, no, I'm very comfortable right here. And so that is creating some tension between management that sees the value in bringing people in the office and several employees who say, I see the advantage of working from home. And if we don't offer it, they seem to be very willing to go somewhere else that is offering it. So that's a challenge. And they have that power, they have that leverage because they read the newspapers too. So one of some of the things that are leading to this are, one, the technology, right? So if you think, what would have happened to us if we didn't have Zoom and WebEx and Teams and all those technology, but we do, and now it just makes it more possible. And because of the technology and the COVID, forced us to work from home, now we know that it can be done. And so employees, what our studies show is that their expectations, what their priorities are, have shifted, and the flexibility is critical. Their autonomy and control over how they do things and where they do things. And yes, their personal needs. I think the health crisis really made us focus on what was important and taking care of our physical health, our mental health, our family, and having that balance. We talk about work-life balance, and now it's more of a work-life integration, that it's not I work 9 to 5 and then after at 5:01 is my time. It's kind of blended together, that I'm going to maybe start a little earlier in the morning, and then I'm going to go for a run in the afternoon, and then I'm going to work a little bit in the evening, but kind of balancing the amount of time that we're spending there.
So it's exploring these shifting priorities that we're seeing with our empowered employees. And thank you, Francis and Lisa, for the items that you've added to the chat. This is an opportunity to take a deeper dive into what is happening in your organization with these items or others, right? And also to share some of the things that you're doing specifically in your organization so that we can learn from each other. We find that is definitely a valuable piece of what we're doing when we're talking about any of these attracting, developing, incentivizing, and retaining our employees. So it'll just be a 5-minute or chat in the breakout. So it will go by quickly, and just keep in mind, we want to give everyone an opportunity to communicate. If you're unable to speak because you might be in an office right now, just let your team or let us know. We understand that happens, and then we'll bring you back and ask for some feedback on what you heard in your breakout room. Are you ready to send us, Robert?
I'm ready to go. All right.
Okay.
Well, enjoy your discussions.
We'll see you in a few minutes. All right, we're jumping back. Welcome back, everybody. Let's go to our chat box one more time, and feel free to add to the chat one item or more that you found valuable in your conversation, how your priorities have changed, what your organization is doing to engage that empowered employee, or other comments. And then we're going to dive into the research. Yeah, thanks, Carly. It's interesting, as we are talking to many organizations, we are hearing much consistency and handling the same challenges, priorities, or reasons why they're reaching out to us. Yes, definitely focus on that remote hybrid workplace is a hot topic, and we're going to dive into that in a little bit as well. Yeah, Joe, sometimes it does feel and seem like entitlement. You're not alone there as well. Company culture. Yes, that's really a big foundation of where all this engagement discussion comes down to. So let's dive into the research and what's happening. One of the sources that we all follow is Gallup, and it's really interesting. One of their latest research articles was entitled "U.S. Employee Engagement Needs a Rebound." And we thought that was pretty interesting because the trend had been moving up. Years ago, it was like everyone was talking about engagement, and then we stopped. And then COVID happened. And when we stopped, engagement had been on the incline. And then over the past couple years, it's actually declined 2% over the last 3 years, putting us at 32% of engaged employees per Gallup's research. Now, the other interesting part of that, and is what we're feeling here, is that the actively disengaged has increased. So we're feeling it on a double way. So that's the dotted line on the bottom that Robert's showing us. So that is increased 2% over the last 3 years. So we're feeling that pinch of less engaged employees and more actively disengaged. They even termed quiet quitting to account for that group. Next slide, please, Robert. So it's interesting though. So even though the employee engagement has been on the decline, our research has shown that 70% are satisfied in their organizations with their current job or their manager. And so it really does beg the question, why are people leaving? And what we're finding, our research finding, is they're actually leaving, Nick, what you put in there, they're leaving their culture or the environment. They're kind of rejecting the workplace and saying that their workplace is indifferent to their needs, or their needs have changed and they're not getting that connection there. So it's kind of interesting that where that entitlement might feel like it, right? That empowered employee is saying, okay, this is what I want and this is what I need, and how can my organization and my leaders give that to me? And we're going to explore that a little bit more as we go through the research here. Okay, so Dale Carnegie conducted research. Actually, we've been conducting employee engagement research for about the last 10 years, and this is our latest finding. And web-based survey. We had over 6,500 respondents, so they're all full-time. This is a global research findings and results, and we had a really nice cross-reference of not only industries, but company sizes. So that's where the data that we're sharing next is coming from. And consistent with our previous data, we found that the organizational drivers of employee engagement, the relationship with the immediate manager, belief in senior leadership, purpose and direction of a company stayed, they remained. So that our employees are still looking for that manager, that immediate manager that connects with them, that has that personal relationship, that actually cares about them. They want that manager to be interested in them. The second is they want to have a belief in senior leadership, right? I trust my leaders and I know that they're taking our company in the right direction. And they want to believe, maybe a little bit more now than before, that the purpose and direction of their company is important to them. They see the bigger picture. They know they're part of making that vision and mission happen, and it's meaningful to them. So that has remained the same. And what we found added to these organizational drivers are more of a quality of life drivers. And that's what we've been experiencing here in the chat and conversation today, right? That balance, blending, integration with our personal life. So many of us have evolved in our thinking of how I live versus work and life, and really integrating that together. And that's why we're seeing, hearing and feeling, experiencing people saying, I don't want to come back into the office because they've created a different lifestyle. And when we do come into the office, the second quality of life driver is the work environment. So what's my work environment in the office, or even what's my work environment at home or hybrid, right? That's become more important versus I just go here, or I just do this. So it's the marrying of all now 5 organizational drivers that are leading to increase the engagement of our employees. Now, so that's one piece of it, how our organization is structured and set up, and those structures, how do they impact or affect our employees? And what we found in our research is what we engage on an emotional level with our employees. That's the plus, the joining of these two factors that lead to employee engagement. So when we can create emotions in our employees, so our employees feel confident, okay, confident to do what? Right, we'll talk about in a moment. Secure, that we had a lot of insecurity over the last 3 years, so people don't want to feel that way, and they also want to feel hopeful about the future, their opportunities, and the company, where the company is going. And so when we have the structure of our organization in place with those relationships, especially with that immediate manager, we're meeting, we're focusing, we're addressing the needs of the integration balance of our personal lives and our work environments. So people are feeling confident, hopeful, and secure. That's when the employee engagement increases, and we're seeing that increased efficiency and output and engagement of our employees. And so let's dive into these emotions a little bit more. Right, confident that they can make decisions, that calculated risks, that they see and understand that their work is contributing to the overall success. So it's not about just coming and doing my job and leaving. The confidence that I'm having an impact on the company. And that confidence comes from their leader support, especially that immediate manager, because that's who we have the most contact with. Secure. We've talked a lot over the last few years about psychological safety and being able to speak up, be supported, knowing that if we're bringing a diverse or new thought, concept, idea, that it's going to be listened to and considered. Might not always be implemented, but the security to know that we can bring that. And then hopeful finally is that I can grow and develop new skills and learn new tools. Excuse me. We saw, right, with the learning through the pandemic, that there were some jobs that weren't important or they weren't deemed necessary to happen. Some people weren't able to pivot to different jobs because of their skill set. And what we're finding is that people don't want to feel that way. So they want to know that their skills can help them grow and develop. So let's take a look at what's going on in your organization. Oh, not yet. We'll have a poll in a moment. Forgot about this one because this is, again, going back to our research, was really interesting. So the light blue bar is the indifferent employees, and the dark blue bar is the engaged employees. So why is it important to focus on these emotional drivers? And the reasoning is because the impact is significant. Look at these numbers: 90%, 200%, 450%, right? So having that person on our team that can say, I know the work I do contributes, they're going to give more productivity, more efficiency. They'll be a better promoter of our company. So they'll help us to attract other new hires, right? They'll be kind of like a commercial for us, and they'll actually help others to stay and retain because they create that energy, especially when those engaged employees are managers or leaders in some role. All right, next slide, Robert. Yeah, there we go. Let's take a look. We're going to do a poll.
And
So
I got the poll ready, Katie.
Excellent. Okay, so as we take a look at these emotional drivers, where is your organization? Okay, so that we're in transition. So we have, let's say, a third, based on our results. Emotions are an interesting topic, and I'd love to see your thoughts in the chat, because it still is a topic that is maybe a little difficult to talk about in a work environment. Yet we have, again, coming through these last few years with people integrating life and work, they want to feel, they want to feel, and that's where the emotions come in. So if you picked my organization is currently implementing emotional drivers, how are you doing that? So either raise your hand and share with us a little bit about that, or go ahead and add it to the chat. How are you addressing those emotional drivers? Maureen, do you want to come off mute and tell us a little bit about what's going on there at Yo, Day and Zimmerman?
Yeah, just in terms of company culture, I mean, we both place candidates, right? We do talent and staffing at Yo, as well as we're a over $1 billion corporation, right? With a lot of divisions on the Day and Zimmerman side. So there are very few interviews where company culture doesn't come up, right? So there's a lot of companies looking at their employer brand. Just about every job candidate, that's a key question. They want to know what environment they're coming into. And make a decision in part based on that.
Yeah.
And that includes flexibility.
Right. One of the top 2 questions, right? Right. We've seen that as well, where instead of saying, I'm going to come here and create the culture or make this impact on the culture, they want to find the culture where they fit. I hear that a lot in the conversations that we're having, right? So as an organization, if we're not already focused on that or anticipating it like you are, Maureen, and I think Nick here in the chat, right, then we're going to be behind the ball. And not only talking about it in the interview process, but how do we spread the concept of our culture in throughout the organization. So it's not just something we say when we're hiring people, right? But it can be seen, felt, experienced every day by our employee team. All right, thank you. Let's keep going. Okay, so taking that concept of emotion, right, and flipping it, what we termed human-centered engagement, right? So we're really connecting with people as individuals and unlocking that emotional connection to our leaders, managers, and the organization. So, nothing new that senior leaders set the strategy, but how do we take in consideration our employees' needs now, right? And what they're looking for, what struggles they may have. For example, education has been going through changes through the pandemic, and there's more people that are homeschooling their kids or alternative schools, and so that might impact an employee's flexibility, and it becomes a struggle. So as a senior leader, how are we setting the strategy, implementing the strategy that takes into consideration our employee struggles? The other struggle might be, I don't want to come into the office, or I want to be a hybrid worker, or it might be, I want to come into the office. And so taking all of that into consideration and also being able to communicate at that level, because the senior leader's trust is built by being able to communicate more clearly and effectively to our team, and communicating, right? That leader that's visible is more important now than ever before. Immediate managers, that's the person that's connecting on a day-to-day basis, and they really need the tools now more than ever to make that connection and make that difference, because they're the ones that are dealing with all of those struggles. And then our organizations, and we saw it a little bit in the chat here, right, that we might have to trade off, or we might have to emphasize one thing or another, and we have to have the framework to be able to do that, as well as create the opportunities for people to grow and develop their skills. One of the things that we're hearing quite regularly when we're talking to folks is they want to develop whatever population they're talking about, individual contributors or managers, leaders. And when we dig into the why, we're hearing often that's because they're asking for it. So our team is asking to either develop themselves, or managers are saying, my team is asking me to develop them. So that is on the increase. And so to be able to have the framework to to deliver that, or to say, okay, yeah, you can have this hybrid work environment, but here's what our expectations are.
Yeah.
And that level of communication.
And Katie, one of the things that we've noticed with our clients is sometimes there's a disconnect between the different divisions at the senior level of an organization. So the executives might say, we want everyone to come into the office, and this is what we want, this is what we want. And then oftentimes the operations managers or the human resource managers are saying, you can do that, but we're going to lose 30% of our staff, and it's going to take us 3 years to replace them. So do you really want to do that? And so a lot of this culture really comes down to creating an atmosphere where we feel connected to each other. That took a hit during COVID because we were not seeing each other in the hallways at the office. We're not running into each other in the cafeteria as much. And so those relationships were not as strong, and they need to be built back up. The other aspect is the emotional aspect that Katie mentioned. And one of the emotions that a lot of people are feeling is stress, right? And so we have some tools for you that if you, Dale Carnegie wrote a few books, and 2 of them are represented here in this golden book. One of them is called How to Win Friends and Influence People, that deals with the relationship aspect. And the other is called How to Stop Worrying and Start Living, which deals with 30 different stress and worry control methods. And they are conveniently placed in this app. So if you take your phone, open up the camera, and just kind of point it at one of these QR codes. If you're an iPhone, point at the QR code on the left. If you're anything else, point at the QR code on the right. And you can download the free app. And in that, we'll have all 30 of Dale Carnegie's human relations principles, as well as 30 stress and worry control principles that you can use yourself to help you influence the people around you more effectively and to manage your own stress. You can also feel free to share them with others. Leave that up for another few seconds. You can also just go to your app store and just type in the search bar Dale, D-A-L-E, and it'll pop up. So one of the things that we have found interesting is that as a result of the pandemic, a lot of the what's a priority now, the numbers have changed. So if you take a look at this, you see that the number of people that are working full time in the office before the pandemic was 54%. Now only 16% are full time in the office, and 25% are working hybrid, and 49% are remote full time. Now those numbers don't add up to 100. That's because of the way the survey was conducted. But if you take a look at this, people, 39% feel that they are more efficient full time in the office. 31% feel that they're more efficient full time remote. And that number is quite different than it was a few years ago. I think before the pandemic, we thought, well, you can't work from home because no one will be working, they'll be watching TV. And now we realize that that's not the case. People are able to work from home and be efficient, and in some cases more efficient.
Hey, Robert, just a caveat back there. Since this was a global research, when we separate out the US and Canada from the efficiency piece of it, the US and Canada skewed more on the remote working, where outside of the US and Canada was heavily on the full-time in the office. So that's skewing the data a little bit. So global organizations are even having to look at their country locations differently and cultural preferences. Here in the US, we are having that more people want to work remotely versus, they feel that they're more efficient when they're working remotely than when they're working in an office. So it's kind of like this is our new reality where we're kind of juggling preference and efficiency, which Robert's going to talk a little bit more about.
Okay. So just as a question in the chat box, I'm just kind of curious how we are managing the balance between location preference and efficiency. So what are some of the things that you're doing in your organization to find that balance between their preference to work remotely and your desire for efficiency.
Yeah, I just want to comment on what Lisa wrote about new ways to chat, to create the water cooler. That's certainly that's certainly been a journey the last 3 years, and we really do need to find ways to make those connections. And people have been so creative. And even though the pandemic is past, we still have to make sure that we're creating those opportunities and not lose sight of that. So thanks for bringing that up, Lisa.
Yeah. Yeah, so some interesting points here. And one of the things that we found, we did a really good job at replacing the formal communication. So the Monday morning staff meeting that was in the conference room on the 3rd floor is still the Monday morning staff meeting, except now it's on Teams or on Zoom or something like that. So we did a really good job of replacing that. We are not doing as good of a job as a whole in replacing the informal communication. And that's where a lot of the relationships are built, the water cooler talks and meeting for lunch and, hey, let's go grab a cup of coffee. And it's been interesting as we work with some of our clients, some of the creative ways that they've come up with to replace that informal communication where people can kind of just, talk about life, oh, my son made the soccer team, or my daughter is, got a scholarship to the college of her dreams, and things like that. All those things that are going on in our lives that really help us to connect with each other. And so, yeah, Francis, we do the team huddles on a monthly basis. Nothing work related, right? Just to kind of build those relationships. So as we start to get towards the top of the hour here, we want to leave some time to discuss some strategies. So the challenge is that empowered employees who now have this leverage and strong leaders can go together to create a powerful force. And so we don't necessarily need to run from the situation, but lean into it and really create some dynamic organizational structures here. So Katie, you want to tell us a little bit about what senior leaders can do?
So here's some recommendations based on our research and our experience. Based on our chat and conversation today, that you're already looking at a lot of these things, so we're recommending a deeper dive. Create that culture of transparency. It goes back to those interview questions, right? So people, what they see is real, and they feel it. And they feel it by feeling safe and being able to trust, because the policies are built around human emotion and people. Obviously, the flexible work solutions, and that needs to be unique for each organization, and sometimes by role, because some jobs can't be remote, and people need to understand that. But that goes back to that culture of transparency. We're also finding the prioritization of skill building, and what do my people need to help them feel productive now and to be set up for the future. And then finally coming down to those managers, re-looking at the skills and tools that we have to support our managers so that they are operating in today, right? Today is changing. And so, it's smarter to anticipate what our managers are going to need versus thinking they are going to adapt. And we're finding the companies that are focusing on managers of all levels saying, what do they need? How can I equip them with new tools or refresh their skills to help them deal with this changing empowered employee? So recommend going back at that senior leader level, making those decisions, as well as our immediate managers, which is the next slide. Yeah. right? Because they are so important. And Robert's going to talk about this. Or not.
One of the things that we found is that while senior leaders are making the strategic decisions, it doesn't always connect with the people. And so the immediate managers play an important role in making sure that information is flowing from the top throughout the organization and doing so in a positive way, and really understanding what the organizational goals are, but also focusing on the people's needs, so that they can inspire and motivate them to want to do more than maybe is even required, right? So that's the definition of an engaged employee, is that they connect with the organization at an emotional level. It's really up to the immediate manager to create that connection, because we work with people more. And if you think about some of the people that when they've left your organization, sometimes they left because of relationships or lack of relationships. Oftentimes they will stay because of those relationships. And the immediate manager can have a huge impact on how confident an employee feels in their role. Do they feel like my work is respected and appreciated, or am I just another piece of the puzzle here?
So a reminder as we come to a close here, right? It's that combination of the drivers, how our organization is structured, with a focus on culture and safety, psychological safety, so that we can really bring out those emotions of confident, secure, and hopeful. And that when our employees feel that way, then their engagement is increasing. And I'm adding to the chat, although it's going to come to Robert, our full white paper that'll give some more details on the research, and also an infographic. And we have a parting thought that we'd like to, or opportunity to leave you with. And the video, thanks, Jen just posted the video in the chat as well. So take it away, Robert.
Okay, so we want to thank you for spending an hour with us today. We want to give you an offer to answer that question. How engaged is your team today, and what can we do to accelerate that engagement? We have a tool that we use with our organizations. It's called a team engagement discussion, and it's a 2-hour facilitated discussion online. We usually get a group of people, about 20 to 30 people together online, and we just kind of talk about what's working in the organization. What are some strengths? What are things that your organization is doing well? What are some of the changes that are currently impacting you? And what do we have to do to respond to those changes? And then we really talk about what are the attributes of success that we as individuals can focus on. And we found that a lot of people say, well, I need to be this and I'm not that, or I'm no good with people, or I'm no good with conflict. We talk about the fact that just because you haven't been good at something in the past doesn't mean that we can't learn it. So we talk about the difference between our natural tendencies and our learned behavior and how we can develop things. We close with a question of what is your commitment to your personal development? And we can come back with a report that kind of shows you what are some of the skills gaps according to what your people think about themselves, who is committed to their personal development, and we have some recommendations for you of what you could do to increase that level of engagement. So if you're interested in learning more about this, it's no commitment, but you just want to learn a little bit more about what it is and how it works, and what are the logistics, just type the word TED, T-E-D, Team Engagement Discussion, in the chat box, and one of our client relationship managers will contact you and set up a time to kind of talk through it, what you can expect from it.
And just to reiterate, we're offering that to you at no charge. So we'd love to connect with you. I just wanted to make that clear. Time, it's 9 o'clock. So thank you. We will stay on for a few minutes if you have any questions or want to chat a little bit. Thank you for being here with us today, for your involvement, and hope you had an opportunity to download more of the information. And we look forward to seeing you again soon.